Welcome back to the Lords and Lore podcast. I'm Matt.
I'm Luca.
And I'm Will.
And this is the podcast for all things fantasy and sci-fi nerddom. We are getting into our new series of shows here for the main topic or the main show, the flagship show of the Lords and Lore podcast network. We are going to be breaking down character classes in Dungeons and Dragons, but I want to specify this is not exclusively going to be about their application or their mechanics in Dungeons and Dragons. That's fun. That'll probably come up a lot, but this is more so great inspiration if you're playing one of those characters, where the origins of those characters in the game might come from, and just our favorites and why we love that class or that type of character. And today, we'll be starting alphabetically with Barbarians. We skipped over Artificer because we think we're going to cover that with Wizards. So we're starting with Barbarians, but we're not going to jump into any of that before we get to the podcast within the podcast, or Luca's litany of literature, wherein Luca tells us about something that's just fascinating him, or something that's bugging him this week. And then we'll move over to Matt's Monster Musings, where I bring a monster of my choosing, and we talk a little bit about its origins and application in tabletop RPG games. And then finally, in Will's Wondrous Wisdom, we started getting to the main topic and talk about historical, real world examples of the main topic. Holy, what a mouthful. Before we begin, though, just in case you missed it, the first ever episode of Unabashed with Chaboy came out last Friday. I interviewed my good buddy Dustin Harris, and we talked about Naruto. It's a really sweet episode. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I'm looking forward to the next ones that come out. So yeah, check that out. Leave a review, hit a thumbs up, all that funky stuff. Rage of Dragons, we did a review on, book review on our show called Ruminations. That was 2 Fridays ago, so if you missed that, check that out. And the next book we're going to be doing in Ruminations is The Fires of Vengeance, which is the sequel, second book in the Book of Burning, or in the Burning, that we'll be covering. So look out for that. That'll come out next month, and stay tuned for the next episode of Unabashed. So I'm done talking for a little while. Luca, what's been on your mind lately?
Nothing negative, like for
That's
a change
awesome.
in this segment, right? Like always brought some like criticism, but I've been reading The Fires of Vengeance, which I will not dive into because Ruminations is coming and I'm not finished it yet. And I've been listening to book 6 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is called, I keep forgetting, The Bone Hunters. Right, I keep forgetting because there's no reason for it to be called that yet that I've seen. Okay. There is like bone casters, which is like a type of magic user, but there's nobody called the Bone Hunters yet, which has been confusing. But I've been really enjoying the book, like a lot. It's maybe my favorite one so far. We're back into the storyline of the first and third books, following all these characters that I really liked, and just the way, like the different groups of characters that have come together from all these stories has been really interesting. I actually have one example for our main topic from this book, which I will not dive into now because it's coming up later. But yeah, I've been really enjoying the Bone Hunters, and I love the way the whole story's been going. Like, I don't want to dive into any spoilers, but it's starting to get to like the main conflict of the larger series, like the 10-book series. It's just been a very, very enjoyable listen as of now. I have no major criticism, no major issues. I've just been enjoying seeing like the evolution of the world that's been happening. So for a first, there's no major
That's great
issues.
So we're just starting to see like all the continents and timelines and stuff coming together now.
Yeah, essentially, like this story has been going on mostly on the continent called Seven Cities, which is where books 2 and 4 happened. But it's got a lot of characters that were from books 1 and 3, and they've like moved continents because of what's been going on. And there's been a few like. So I don't want to dive into any like details because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, because Malazan is like a must read for me, I would think, for any fantasy fans. But it's been like like book 6 has really been like the first that's like majorly set up the conflict that we will see being resolved, and then what I'm assuming is like the end of book 6 and then 7 through 10, where like a lot of characters have sort of like, once you, again, because Malazan does not care about holding your hand and or anything telling about the world. It's like, now that we've done the groundwork of like 5 books to like meet these characters and learn about the conflicts of the world and the sort of situations, like now we're building towards the big climax ending in book 10.
Do you have a preference, like that stuff? Because I know obviously the infamous time jump thing.
Yeah.
Was that like, would you rather have had that explained to you from the get-go? Do you think you would have enjoyed it more?
Maybe. Like, again, the one thing, like the big criticism I have is for the no map, but the time jump thing didn't bother me so much. Like the fact that it doesn't explain anything honestly doesn't bother me, just because it's like so cool, like figuring something out for yourself, I guess. Like you're like, oh wow, like that's this guy. Like how I figured out that the time jump wasn't 10,000 years, where I was like, oh, this guy knows this guy, and I've heard that name in book 1. Like this has to be happening pretty recently. So like I enjoy that. I don't mind that, and I don't mind like having to learn about the world like that. So no, I honestly I've been really enjoying the Malazan series.
The title got me thinking. I don't know if this is a conversation point necessarily, but just like names in fantasy, names of groups, I think is so important to how fantasy, or like our interpretation of it, in that like you could call somebody the Bone Crusher, and that has all its implications with it. And then sometimes you get like the flip where it's like someone's named this thing and it's not what you thought. Like example coming to mind is like not the name of a group, but the name of this adventure in D&D is called Dragon Heist, something like that. And so if you're not familiar with D&D, you would be like, oh, this obviously has to do with dragons. You're stealing some sort of dragon. But dragons in D&D are, or in some places in that universe, are actually like the currency.
Okay.
Like gold coins are called dragons. So it has nothing to do with dragons, which makes sense because it's a levels 1 through 5 adventure. So you shouldn't fight a dragon.
Yeah.
You'll die. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about like those really like iconic names in fantasy? Will, I see you shaking your head.
I am
Not a fan.
Yeah, as per usual, not a fan. No. Sorry, I was choking. That's why I was off screen for a second.
Casual.
We're all eating our words about Malazan today.
Nice.
No, I like it when there's wordplay in titles. Game of Thrones is a pretty good one for titles of characters and like, I guess like nicknames and stuff like that. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but oh well, yeah. For example, like what do you call it? Tyrion Lannister. His nickname is like the Imp, and there's been like multiple instances. For example, like with like the Baron Martell, when he first heard of the Imp, he thought it was going to be like this monstrous-looking creature. It was actually just a baby. So, like, I kind of like it when there is wordplay. So, like, Dragon Heist sounds kind of cool because it's kind of yeah.
Like it's how they like essentially represent, or like what meaning is given to the name or title within the story. Like there's a good example from Malazan book 2. The book is called Dead House Gates. I mean, that's not the thing, but they're like in the book there's they're like a group called Coltane's Chain of Dogs, and like when you just hear that, like it doesn't even sound all that cool or like interesting, but like once you've read the whole story, and I will not go into any spoilers because like honestly the ending of Dead House Gates was one of the most like heart-wrenching like military campaigns that I've ever listened to. But like once you've heard the whole story, like for me now the Chain of Dogs like holds like a really deep significance in the world of Malazan, whereas like just hearing like, oh, the Chain of Dogs, like what, you're like walking some dogs, like who cares?
One example from a book I read, The Blood Song, Anthony Ryan, first book in Raven's Shadow. the main character is referred to as the Hope Killer, which is like a very devastating name. Like that sounds brutal. And I'm not going to spoil it, but when you find out what that actually means, it really sort of the whole book is sort of spent on humanizing this character through the eyes of someone who is upset with that title being given to them, I'll say. And so yeah, through learning what that actually means is like, oh yeah, it's this guy's a dude, he's not like this being of destruction, hope killing. Yeah, cool. Anything else about book 6 of Malazan?
No, right now I'm like about halfway through. Like one big like action sequence just ended, and oh yeah, I did actually just like a quick note. Like I don't like reading claustrophobic like scenes.
Oh.
There's like a scene where there's like a group of people essentially crawling through like space that's like entirely like shoulder, like their heads, like they're on their stomachs and their heads keep hitting like the ceiling, and they're like crawling on their stomachs. They don't even know if there's an exit on at the end, so just
hate
like
that.
Horrifying.
Hate that. I hate those situations because you can't crawl backwards as well.
Yeah,
that makes me sick.
You can't turn around. It's dark.
Oh man,
you don't even know if you're going forward. Like if there's an exit out there. Yeah, it was terrible. Very well written though.
Nice.
Anyway, that will do it for today's litany or addition to the litany.
I'm glad it's a positive one.
Yeah.
This journey has been something else, man. Okay, so let's move over to Matt's Monster Musings. And sticking with the theme of M, I'm going to be talking about the Marilith. Now, Luca, you might... Oh, shoot. Hang on, guys. I forgot my mini. So, this is the Marilith. As you can see, it has the feminine top. This doesn't pick up on camera. I don't know why I do this every time. The feminine top and a snake-like bottom, but you'll also notice she has 6 arms. So, this is a creature I first encountered in Dungeons & Dragons. And Luca, you would have seen this in a session. I don't know if you remember, but...
Remember. One of the characters saw it in a vision, right?
That's right. But you'll also remember the first session of the campaign, one of our player characters picked up a sword that ended up being a cursed sword.
I do remember this, yeah.
Very foolishly, even after identifying the object, decided to pick it up and
bind it, yep.
Yep. So that was a mistake. It was like a level 9 curse that couldn't be broken easily. So that was definitely one of the main sort of plot threads of the campaign, was this cleric that worshipped the god of wisdom and knowledge stupidly being bound to this cursed sword. That sword belonged to a Marilith. And Mariliths, again, being this giant snake woman thing, they stand 9 feet tall while they're sort of on their tail, but they're probably like 20 feet in length from the end of their tail to the tip of their head. That was supposed to be the other way around, but whatever. And they can weigh 4,000 pounds.
What?
Yeah, substantial. They're demons, so they're not like snake people, which do exist in D&D. They're called Yuan-Ti, I think Yuan-Ti. Mm-hmm. These are demons from the abyss, not from the hells. I think they're from the abyss, which is a little bit different. There's devils in D&D, and those are like fallen angel sort of things that then get corrupted and have been that way for a while. And then there's demons who have just always been terrible. And yeah, so this is one of those, and it's probably third in the pecking order. So there's demon lords, then there's the Baylor, which is like a combat rating 20 enemy that you can fight. So one of the harder things to fight in the game. And then there's these things that sort of rank just underneath them. So they might take their orders from Baylors, but anything lower than that, any demon lower than that would take orders from this and follow this thing into battle, which they often do. A Marilith will take any breach in the prime material plane, or not even the prime material, in any plane of existence besides the abyss. If a portal opens between those, a Marilith will go and just kill anything it sees on the other side. Reason being, destroying things on the other side of a portal to the abyss strengthens that portal. and keeps it open longer so that more demons can come through and fuck shit up. So even if a cult of snake worshipping demon cultists like invite this Marilith from the abyss onto the prime material plane, it will just kill who's ever there when the portal opens. So that's a fun sort of plot element to play with, because fuck cultists, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, and any demon that's nearby a Marilith when she does this will follow it, because they know anywhere a Marilith goes, destruction will follow. They are leaders in the army of demons. Yeah, when they go through one of these portals, they don't return once they're done fucking shit up. They stay there and try to expand their influence to any and all who might be into that type of relationship. And so they will often just be found chilling, posted up with an embarrassment of riches brought to them by their thralls or slaves or enslaved peoples or whatever the case may be, worshippers. And they're sort of vain in that they're always sort of decked out in jewelry, always have sort of treasure around them, and their swords are like elegantly crafted, some of the finest craftsmanship, craftswork, whatever. Their swords are nice. And they're obsessed with them, all 6 of them. And so going back to that campaign, the sword that character picked up was one of the swords of this creature. And so when this creature loses their sword, they'll go to any lengths to get it back. But in that campaign, this creature was sort of stuck inside this forested area by this like spell. And so was using their influence outside of that spell. You might remember, Luca, your squad was attacked by snake people.
Yeah, I do remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's why that happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're
That
trying
cleric
to
was gone.
Yeah. But one of you, I think, had the sword or something. I can't remember. Something like that. Or maybe
No, he left with it. He left with it.
Yeah, but anyways, they were tracking you down type of thing.
That's terrifying.
Yes.
So they control. Do they control the Yanti?
Not specifically in the monster manual, but they're both snake people. And so my sort of interpretation was it that this thing came over in the Calamity and was one of the few Oni, as they were called in my campaign universe, was one of the ones that wasn't killed and got left behind and then bound because it was too strong. And so these snake people, or these people, started worshiping it. And just like how the tieflings turned from humans into tieflings, these people turned from people into Yanti.
That's cool.
Because of this thing's influence. Yeah. So also these enslaved people or servants, they'll carry this being, this Marilith, around on, like, you know, you see like
a palanquin.
Yeah, exactly. But she does weigh like 4,000 pounds, so it
a
takes
9 foot long palanquin.
Yeah. Yeah. So in D&D, they've been around since like 1976. They're in the first monster manual, or at least, sorry, in first edition of D&D. But they're in like Fiend Foley, or I'm not that dude. They can teleport, which is terrifying, up to 120 feet. They move 40 feet per round, which is usually more than most players can. So that with their teleport, you can't really outrun one of these.
No, it's horrifying.
Most terrifying, though, and this is what happened in that sort of session where this character, the character that was cursed, encountered this. He tried to go and pray away the curse, and then so ended up in this like weird ethereal realm thing where this thing was like faced, and he has to defeat it in order to break the curse. But this thing has 7 attacks per turn, 6 with its sword and 1 with its tail. And each sword does, you know, sword damage. So it just killed him in, I think, 3 shots before it even got its full round of combat. And in addition to that, it has 6 reactions, which most players and enemies only get 1 reaction per combat round. This thing gets 6, which is ridiculous. These things are really hard to beat.
What?
Yeah. In addition to that, they can summon other demons and even other Mariliths. So say you're fighting one, you might fight it and then it summons another one of itself, and that one also has 7 attacks per round. So it's a tricky situation to try. And if that wasn't bad enough, it's resistant to poison, fire, cold, lightning, and non-magical attacks. So you don't want to fucking come across one of these. Yeah, it's really tough to beat. This would have been like a end level thing had you guys gotten that far in that storyline. Unfortunately, that player had to leave the campaign, so we never really got to see that play out. But I still would have brought it up some way because it was way too cool not to. Yeah, and also they're highly intelligent. Now it is speculated, not confirmed, that these are influenced by some Buddhism. I don't know the correct way to say that, but gods from Buddhism and Hinduism, if that's the correct. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't know if I'm saying those things right. But one of the gods is called Mara. This is the tempter. And not specifically like, okay, so say like Satan for Christianity is tempting people away from God. This is not like that at all. This is just the personification of temptation and sort of like vanity. And then Shiva, who's a pretty mysterious god, but the functions of that god are creation and destruction. So some sort of amalgam between those two comes out, and they're often depicted with like many arms. So that's why people sort of point there as the influence for this. But yeah, so that's the Marilith. Any thoughts before we get into the verses?
Extremely horrifying. Like especially in like a D&D setting, like that's I didn't even know it could. It's like 6 reaction. That's disgusting.
Yeah, it's gross.
Like it would murder our entire campaign at our strongest points in like maybe 1 or 2 combat rounds.
I think so, yeah. And so like you only send in your barbarian to deal with it in close range because it could probably survive a few rounds with it, but everybody else has got to get the fuck out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's like, what is it? Like a 4th level traveling spell is like 100 feet or 120 feet. Like that's disgusting.
Yeah, 4th level is a little bit
almost
I think you can dimension door at 4th level.
Yeah, dimension door.
Or maybe that's a 4th level spell.
That is a 4th, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's like 8
500 feet.
Okay, yeah.
But still, like, come on.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously you can send these like back to their own plane of existence with something like what's that spell called? Banishment, yeah. So yeah, that could work as well. But yeah, tough because they're very highly intelligent, and I think that's an intelligent save. But maybe it's not. But their stats are really high either way, so it's tough to beat. Yeah, Will, any initial thoughts?
So this is the first time I've ever heard of it, and I've no idea what you guys were just talking about for the past like 3 minutes.
Yeah, sorry, you weren't in that run of D&D yet.
I mean, if I was there, I probably would have been able to handle it, but
you though, not your character, just Will.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Also my cleric personification, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like when you guys were like going off, like I guess like the more crunch aspect of the campaign, and this creature. Like the first thing that came to my mind, especially because I just watched like Mortal Kombat the other day, like the original one.
Yeah.
Like it made me think of like Goro and Shiva.
Yeah.
Like the Shokan princess. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely that, which I'm fairly certain is based off of Shiva as well.
Yeah.
And then also the from Elder Scrolls. So like I don't like butcher me on the pronunciation, but like
everybody roast this guy in the comments.
Yeah. The Tai Si from Akavir. So like if you play like for example like Skyrim, when you get to like the ancient base of like dragon hunters of like the original blades, like you find like all these like I guess like East Asian inspired weapons and armor, and like that's where that comes from in terms of Akavir, because Akavir, which is like a separate continent east, but also like ahead in time, which is like a whole other story. But so like they're described as like having kind of like these like snake like appearances, like specifically with like the tail and stuff like that, based on different interpretations. But it could also be like an instance of like how I guess like personality traits are like personified as we see like in the real world, like in like real world history.
Yeah.
So like maybe they're saying like, oh, they're snake-like, but that doesn't actually mean like they have a snake body. But we don't
going
know.
back to like the name thing we were just talking about, like
Yeah.
snake like could refer to like sort of the caricatures we put on that type of, like, you know, in fables, snakes will be the, I guess, going back to like biblical references, like the deceivers or the silver tongued.
Yeah. Yeah, but as far as like D&D sounds, that's definitely a hope killer.
Yeah, okay, so let's move into verses. So this is probably more of okay, we'll do two, I guess. So against last week's Dryad, I'm assuming you guys would probably want the Dryad. Yeah, that's fair. But I think maybe more interesting, going back to our first episode, check it out if you haven't already, where I talked about the Jodogumo, the spider woman sort of thing. Definitely more similar to this. So what would you guys rather encounter, the Jorogumo or the Marilith?
The Jorogumo.
Why is that?
Just
lack
because
of arms,
I think the the Marilith is either certain death or certain enslavement in like the worst possible way. Whereas like I feel like out of two terrible options, I feel like the Jorogumo is slightly less terrible. Although the spider part is like way more horrifying than the snake.
Are you more? That's two more legs.
Yeah,
it was 8 versus 6, man.
I mean, those are arms at least.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
They're like human.
Will, what about you?
So like if you take away like, I guess like the D&D stuff, like what powers does each have, right? So I guess there's like enthrallment to a certain degree for both. But it sounds like with this,
the enthrallment for the Marilith is more self-imposed. Like people will just decide to worship them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought it was like
they can't really bind you to the world, as far as I know.
Oh, okay. I thought it was kind of like like almost like a vampire enthrallment.
No, I just think it's people who just like,
just simp for Meryl.
I simp for you, Meryl, like Lady Jamistrasu or whatever they pick me up with your 6 arms by the throat or whatever.
I mean, the teleportation thing I think is the scariest part, because like, can you imagine like an absolute snake unit just like teleporting on top of you?
Oh my god, dude, that's brilliant. If I ever use this in D&D, that's what I'm doing. That's insta-kill.
Yeah, I know, because that's 4 tons, and like you could just do that like on an opening. Like you could just like slaughter an NPC by dropping this.
Oh my god,
absolute!
If the demon army ever invades, that's how they make planes somehow and just drop these things.
No, just keep teleporting, going up and down. You just fall.
Yeah. That's awesome. Would you guys say, just final question, would you say you're more afraid of spiders or snakes?
Personally, I find spiders more gross.
But which are you more afraid of?
I'd probably spiders.
Okay.
Something about all the legs and the furriness, and it's just so like
unsettling. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I think maybe a snake, because I've never actually touched a snake. So like I don't know what they would feel like, right?
Have you touched a spider?
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, not like our bait, like like a tarantula or something, or like a chonker of a spider.
A chonker.
Like a dead one at like the Telus World of Science at Edmonton, like when I was in elementary school.
Yeah. I've caught snakes before, like in the river valley, like the little like garter snakes. And I mean, I was a child, so I wasn't afraid of spiders or snakes at that time. I since have grown up, and I am. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm again, like I was saying in the first episode, I've conquered or tried to conquer my fear of spiders. But when you get to like hand-sized spiders, all that is out the window. It's got to die. Whereas I think like the equivalent snake of that, I don't know. I'm just less scared by, because there's more of it and it has to move. Like, so if you could hit a snake where it can't hit you. Like, you
Yeah,
know what I'm saying? But like
they're
a
also
spider is a
super fast.
concentrated area of death and terrifying.
But it's just like, well, they're just like pure muscle, though, right? Like they could turn any up and down, left and right, or whatever.
Ugh.
And, you know, just like flopping around. They can like, I mean, once they like recoil up, then it's all over, buddy. They'll bite you.
I mean, spiders are definitely worse than snakes in my opinion. But between these two monsters, I feel like with the goal of being to survive, I would rather see the spider lady than the snake lady, because with the snake lady, it's death, or you serve her and watch her.
Simp.
Like you have to carry her palanquin and then break her back, carrying her around just so you can watch her slaughter everybody you've ever known. Like,
yeah.
Break my back. Marilith daddy. Yeah, no. Good point. Yeah, if I can answer. Yeah, I think the spider lady, like, I guess the intentions are less known, right? Like, you know, you might be able to bargain with one. You know, sometimes they're even they might even feel some sort of real emotion towards you if they're like luring you in. You don't know. You could change their mind on things. You could live a normal life with them in their like regular human form and, you know, feed them bug snacks or whatever. But with the Marilith, it's she just wants to kill things and have you.
And then as she kills things, you like keep watching all these demons coming through this portal. Like, geez, man, this is.
Yeah, I brought my friends. Is that okay?
Are they like? So like I don't know like their backstory in D&D, but are they like sentient? Like, or are they just, I guess, like compelled?
Mariliths are, they're super intelligent.
Okay, but
more so than any or most demons.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, definitely the spider chick.
Yeah. Okay. With that, we'll move into Will's wondrous wisdom. So we'll move into the topic of barbarians, I should say.
Yeah.
And so maybe run us down some history of barbarians in the real world and some good examples.
Yes.
Yes, barbarians.
I mean, I guess to start off, like, what do you guys think of when you hear the word barbarian?
Think of Kratos and Gimli.
Wow. I wouldn't have said Gimli. That's interesting. And before you put your background as Kratos, I didn't. So when you say barbarian, I go back to like that 80s fantasy art era of like dudes with like huge chests and like their bodies have baby oil on them or something.
Fur loincloths.
Yeah, and they got like a two-handed sword and fur. The loincloth is a necessary part. And maybe like one shoulder strap. That's not really connected to anything, but they have it. That's what I think of.
Hell yeah. My regular Saturday night apparel.
Fucking guy.
I have to go raiding with the boys. I mean, so a barbarian, like the term originated when the Romans in antiquity, I guess, started to move upward on the map towards like mid Europe. So like present day, like France and Germany, and basically it was like their word for like uncivilized people. Like when you're comparing them to, or like compared to like Romans, because like a lot of the history when we talk about barbarians, like it's kind of it all comes from like I guess like Roman texts that have survived over the ages, all of which are pretty much highly like condescending. I mean, a barbarian was basically anyone who wasn't from like the Italian peninsula, I guess.
I guess by definition, it's uncivilized or primitive.
Yeah, and see, like when you talk about like primitive, for example, is like a super loaded word. Generally, like finally get to use as a side note, I'm going to use my anthropology degree for the first time.
Take that, Mom.
I mean, like primitive is a super loaded word because it's kind of like it definitely like implies like ethnocentrism, which is basically saying like I'm judging you on the standards of my civilization, which is
Right.
basically what the Romans used. So barbarian is just kind of an umbrella term. Um, it's not like a defined class of people as it would be um, like in D&D or like Elder Scrolls or whatever. It's just basically anyone who wasn't Roman. So specifically, though, it was most often used with the various like Germanic tribes in Europe. So yeah, as a side note, this is my background. For those who are watching, it just shows a bunch of like houses, or I guess like kind of like huts with straw on it, just
Thatched
super.
roofed housing.
Yes, thatched. We're gonna change the background here.
Thatched roof
Go to map.
cottages.
Yo, this is. Yeah, boy.
Oh wow! Professor Will has just changed his background from thatched roofed cottages to the
A map of Europe and various
migration of barbarians. Holy. Like a weatherman right now.
Yeah, as you can see,
Today we have a low of.
We have a high density of barbarians up north. So Germanic peoples, it's mostly believed that they originated from like, I guess like Proto-Indo-Europeans, basically kind of shooting up from what would be the Middle East, Northwest into Europe. And then they basically just hung out there. A lot of them was like a lot of their society wasn't like the barbarian raiders that we think of like in like Diablo or like D&D. They're most often they were just like agricultural, just like generic sheep herding type dudes just hanging out. Yeah, and like that's where we get like going back to your example of like what a barbarian looks like, Matt, when we have like the leather straps or like I don't know, just like the two-handed axe, like those kinds of weapons and armor and stuff like that. Like most often those were just like farmers' tools that was used. And so when like Roman conquest would move northward up into like the meat of the continent of Europe, that's where they would encounter basically all these like farmer groups and stuff like that. And to like the Romans is like a lot of records basically saying like, yeah, these guys are nothing like how we are. The climate sucks, which is true. Like when you compare it like to like the Mediterranean and stuff like that, super different. They all sound super weird because different languages, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's basically where it came from. It was kind of used, and it was basically used all the way throughout Europe. Like when Romans would just encounter a group. So, for example, like when Roman conquest moved into like the British Isles, they'd be like, "Oh, look at that, more barbarians. They all sound the same because they all sound different."
Yeah. Because I guess uncivilized is also a matter of perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get at earlier with like the whole primitive and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But again, they were just regular farmer societies and stuff like that. But basically, just like to put it into perspective, like they didn't need to have marble buildings and stuff like that as you would see in like Rome or Greece and stuff, or like Spain, just because A, materials weren't available, and B, there was really no need to do so, like when you to live kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, like basically all these chiefly Germanic groups. For example, like Western Rome, like the city of Rome was sacked in 410 AD by barbarians, but it was actually just a group of basically non-Romans in Europe who just were like, "Yo, let's roll heavy on these guys." Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely like several incidents that basically made like the Roman people like not like these non-Roman Europeans. So, for example, like the Battle of Teutoburg, 9 AD, basically like 15 to 20,000 Romans are basically just died crossing through a forest in Germany because they just got like rolled on. Apparently, there's like a Netflix show called Barbarians
Right.
that's like the focus of this. I haven't seen it. I just read about it somewhere earlier today when I was researching at the last minute. Yeah, I guess.
So, some questions. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
I was expecting some pointing on the map though, which we
Oh
didn't
yeah.
get.
So like this doesn't show the move northwest from, I guess, the Middle East / India that we call today, those regions, but they were kind of just like vibing up north, like where you'd see, I guess, I don't even know, man, like Netherlands and Germany and stuff like that, and slowly shot their way down. Yes, as we can see here, notice how it's very white down there. That's actually because there's no Germanic people, whereas the darker shades there were. So, yeah, because I think this is, I don't even know the scaling for this map. I just looked at it because it had arrows, but I think it was like from like 1000 BC to like 100 AD. But yeah,
wow.
basically a bunch of people from like the people who like basically eventually turned into Europeans. It's believed that they originated like in like the region of like India and the Middle East, and like zipped northwest and then hung out and zipped back down. Yeah.
So
Any questions? I guess I don't know.
yeah, barbarians as a umbrella term, right? Because obviously it depends on who's calling them barbarians. Who can judge whether they're primitive or uncivilized, or would have that opinion based off how they live. But what are some groups that would fit under that umbrella term based off history as being written by more advanced, I'm using quotations for the audio listeners, societies? Like, would you call
like,
Vikings barbarians?
I guess, yeah. Like if you're gonna like be referring to like the class, because they were definitely. I mean, when we think of barbarians in media, like which we'll get into soon, I think, like aggressive, big, burly dudes. So yeah, I mean, definitely like groups that like depended on like basically attacking other people in order to keep like their like economies going and stuff like that, and basically survive where they live.
Right.
I guess Vikings would be like dead on. Maybe like like the Scottish incursions into like Roman Europe would also be a good example. Which is
What
why
are
they
those
built that.
people called? Like the
Like,
Pikes and the Saxons? Would that fit in the umbrella as well?
no, Saxons came from mainland Europe
Okay.
shortly after the German or the after the Romans, but no, there's kind of, I guess the Celts would be a good example, the Celtic peoples, because they were kind of the OG original groups that lived in the British Isles, and they famously like clashed with Rome as well, and were often called barbarians. Yeah, I guess the Franks and the Visigoths and all that stuff like that as well.
Cool. That's helpful for a definition of barbarian for sure.
Yeah.
Because just cat out of the bag, I struggled with the definition for a while based off my interpretation from my life of fantasy indulging and whatnot, consuming, I should say.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, like as a side note, I guess like the way that when we think of the word barbarian, like that image that comes to mind, like super big dude with big axe and stuff like that.
Strapping lads.
Those were kind of in like long hair and unwashed and all that stuff like that. Like those would have been, I guess, like caricatures of people like in other parts of the world, for example, like Rome or wherever else. Like almost like a nightmare, like a bedtime story kind of thing. Even though they were actually just like farmers who were just like hanging out and like didn't have access to like higher quality metals and stuff like that until later on. So they would just
shampoos.
Use like,
Would you call like Beowulf a barbarian?
Mm-hmm. I'd say no.
Okay.
Because he's a king too. Like he's not necessarily like that aggressive raider type dude, even though he's like a Dane. I wouldn't call him that. It's definitely much later on, because Beowulf is believed to have taking place like 800, 900 AD.
Okay.
So, like at this point, like a lot of these groups have definitely become more defined and kind of made splinter groups as well.
Cool. So yeah, let's move into I think that's a pretty good definition to roll with. So maybe now we'll jump into some deep dives and some favorites. We'll start with you, Luca.
All right. I'll just throw out some honorable mentions that I won't deep dive into, but like Gimli for me is like the quintessential D&D like
let's
barbarian.
talk about this.
Okay.
Because I disagree.
Okay.
But like, so say shout out to Kevin, who is in part responsible for this podcast with all the technical help he provides me with. Kevin, you're the best. Salute to you. Played a barbarian, Dude Rock in the D&D campaign, barbarian dwarf. But and so from that, you sort of get the vibes of Gimli of being sort of like headstrong. I have a big axe and I'm a shorter dude, but I'm just as much as capable as the long-haired elf guy with the bow. Which is very true in our D&D campaign. Dude Rock was a beast. But I find it different because I think the dwarves in Middle Earth are actually pretty advanced and civilized, even though they're a little bit foolhardy and, again, headstrong, more so than elves and men. Maybe not probably on the same playing field as men. They're just a little bit more jolly. I don't know what the word would be. They have a better time than men, but they're probably just as quick to fight and not responsible the way that elves are. But we see, like, when we go to Moria or when we go to the Lonely Mountain, their architecture and their society is pretty advanced, mechanically speaking. Their armor too is like very finely crafted. So, like, I don't know if I would see Gimli as a barbarian. I guess only through the context of Legolas, who he's paired up to.
Right. Well, I wasn't saying like I don't consider the dwarves like a barbarian race.
Okay.
I mean like Gimli as a singular fighter. Like
okay.
I'm talking about like more in the sense like Gimli's fighting. Like you call it like in terms of like fighter or barbarian, but like I mean he has a giant axe and then other smaller axes that he throws at people, and then he just smashes them with an axe. Like he doesn't do anything else.
I definitely think he uses rage. So that's probably a good call, actually.
So for me, that's like Gimli's like the barbarian type fighter.
Any thoughts on that, Will, specifically?
No, I think Luca dug himself out of the whole ASAP. Just saving throw at the last minute.
Not 20 on that.
Yeah, because I was going to say he's not a barbarian in terms of like dwarven groups because they have like an economy based on like trade, for example. And
I mean dwarves are definitely not barbarians. They're like advanced magical society. They've built like they're the best engineers in Middle Earth. Like they're not barbarians. But Gimli as an individual,
that's fair. Yeah.
Then another great one is Guts from Berserker. He is a barbarian through and through. Like he has armor that puts him into the rage state where he doesn't even care about like the damage to his own body. He just kills until everything around him is dead. Like he is pure barbarian, but not my favorite, so I don't want to dive in. From Song of Ice and Fire, essentially all the Ironborn from the Iron Isles, like that is their entire like way of life was based on raiding. Like nothing grows on the Iron Isles. Everything they need, they go and raid the coast. Like that's all they do. Even in like pre like Game of Thrones arc, like before even the first book, like that was what their culture is based on completely. Even before the first men and Andals came to Westeros, like they were there, and giants didn't go into the Iron Isles, and like the children of the forest didn't go there because the weirwood trees didn't grow there. Like they were always barbarians on the Iron Isles.
I think if Vikings are barbarians, then Ironborn are also barbarians.
Yeah. Definitely by far, yeah.
And then I did mention both of these characters on the previous episode, which I can't remember which one it was, but it was from the Red Queen's War trilogy. Jalin Kendith and Snorri vs. Snuggerson. They're like so Snorri is like the classic Viking. Like he is an actual Viking, and his fight style is giant axe. He's like super tall, like almost 2.5 meters tall, broad shoulders, long, like blonde hair, giant axe, and just murders anything in his path. But he is also honorable and a family man and extremely emotional and intelligent, which is like the nice combination. Then you have Jalin, who is essentially his moral opposite, where he doesn't essentially have much of a moral code, but he has that like barbaric fighting style where I think I talked over like
madness.
He gets like battle madness, where if his life is in danger, he just goes insane and essentially does everything to survive, which I like, that like sort of two barbarian-ish characters with different characteristics juxtaposed next to each other. But my current favorite barbarian is Karsa Orlong from the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Ooh.
And Karsa is not a human. He is what's called a Teblor, which is a subspecies or a subgroup of a race called the Thelomin Toblakai. And they are...
That's a mouthful.
Yes. So they're from the continent of Genebacus, which is the continent of the first book. They're an isolated tribe. And essentially, like physically, they're extremely tall. Like I think he's said to be almost like 2.5, 3 meters tall, extremely broad and muscled, like just very, very physically imposing. They also have 4 lungs. That's just like an interesting thing. But their entire culture is like very, very violent. They're also very long lived, like they live hundreds of years. And they consider human beings to be children. And this is a traditional farewell among the Teblor. Before they go out to battle, they say to each other, "May you slay 1,000 children," which doesn't refer to actual kids, but like to human beings, because we're so small and live so like short compared to them.
Right.
But Karsa is another example of like a very dynamically changing character, where he leaves his tribe in book 3. So he is the point of view character we get at the very start of book 3. And you see him like leaving his tribe with only 2 of his friends, and they're essentially going to slaughter the children around their little isolated tribe. And essentially he leaves, and his worldview is shattered through his journey, and he essentially grows and gains wisdom, and he isn't just like a thick-skulled big guy. I have a few quotes here.
Oh yeah.
To give you a little sense of Karsa's personality.
Now, is this pre or post his pilgrimage or whatever you want to call it?
So this is post, or like during, essentially.
Okay.
So this is a quote from, I believe it is from book 3, The House of Chains. Karsa's expression soured, and he said, "When I began this journey, I was young. I believed in one thing. I believed in glory. I know now, Sibal, that glory is nothing. Nothing. This is what I now understand." "What else do you understand now, Karsa Orlong?" she asked. "Not much. Just one other thing. The same cannot be said for mercy."
Oh.
So he learns the value of mercy, essentially, because he was, no spoilies, but he was in a situation where he essentially learned the value of mercy. And another quote, this happens once Karsa is, again, no spoilies, but he is like, he gets the attention of a god who chooses him for a specific task.
Love it.
And this is his reply to gaining the attention of a god. He says, "No one chooses me. I do not give anyone that right. I am Karsa Orlong of the Teblor, and all choices belong to me."
Wow.
So he has like the indomitable spirit. And another quote that he often says is, whenever somebody doubts him or tries to like irritate him, he usually just goes quiet and just says, "You will witness." And then he does whatever he was going to do.
I like it.
Love Karsa Orlong. I mean, he's also a horrifying person, because I mean, just the things he does in the beginning of book 3 are enough to be like, yeah, this man is pure evil. Like, again, I won't get into any spoilies, but yeah, it's
no spoilies.
no spoilies.
Yeah, those are sick examples. I like that character a lot.
Yeah, he's really interesting. And just as like I just love that like juxtaposition of like the brutality plus him actually having some substance and wisdom and like learning and sort of evolving.
Mhm.
I just really loved reading, and I love reading any part that like is following Karsa, and any interaction he has with people is just hilarious.
Now, I think there's something we should mention here. A couple things, but most importantly, maybe the elephant in the room amongst the three of us is that we had a previous episode of the show that hasn't aired yet. We don't know if it will, where we talked about tropes. We had a little bit of a different format then, but we talked about tropes, and in doing so, Will's trope that he hates is the big guy trope, the big sort of gentle giant, big dummy, but he can swing an axe type character. Am I getting that right? Is that a good definition of what you don't enjoy about the big guys?
Big guy.
Oh my gosh. Oh, if you're not a video watcher, if you're an audio listener, you have to go.
Yeah,
check
just
that
forget
part
it.
out yourself.
Yeah, I mean, like, as in like big guy, as in like,
Because this would be the most of all the character classes in D&D. This is the one most catered to the big guy trope.
This
right?
is the big guy. Like,
Yeah. It could just be called big
guy.
guy.
like, I'm talking like, you know, like the 7 foot tall Mr. Galaxy wide guy, but who's also like super, like just like dumb.
Yeah.
And just like happy, but just like super stupid. Like, it's just like, that's when I don't like the big guy.
Okay. So if the big guy has, moderate
like
intelligence and emotion, you're fine with it?
Yeah. I mean, so long as he doesn't have like a can of beans for a brain or something.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I think the example that I used for that
Pumbaa, dude.
No, it was Brock from Pokemon.
Oh,
like
you would okay.
Brock the Barbarian.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's my next character, dude. Just this womanizing piece of shit barbarian. It's just.
But he's also like often like portrayed as just like not sharp, I guess.
Yeah,
I find
that character trope is really present in anime. The big stupid dude who's always happy. Yeah,
especially like Gluttony from Full Metal Alchemist, like that.
Oh, okay.
Is what I don't like.
Nuh-uh. So then, what are some of your favorites? Go ahead.
Me. No.
I'm my favorite barbarian. Rips off shirt. Odds the raccoon hat.
Yeah, no, I'll save that for later. Save that for like Explorer.
Ranger.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I think my favorite is Kulikan from or Kukulin from he's like the main like Irish like folk hero. And,
okay.
Like, his description is pretty cool. It's so like when he's just like normal, he's like I don't know, just like generic looking, or like he's described as like very like good looking and like handsome and stuff like that. But he'll like have like these like random like episodes where he just like his body just like inflates and like it basically like
Popeye.
Yeah, no, and like his like hair explodes. He's basically going like Super Saiyan, and that's what it is. If you look up a picture, that's what it looks like, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and like one of his eyes like falls out, and like the other one gets like super big.
Yeah,
it's
hardcore.
Yeah, definitely really cool. I'd recommend it. So if you want to like get into like that kind of stuff, it's like pre-Christian Ireland mythology is pretty dope. Mostly because I'm just playing AC Valhalla and the DLC dropped like the other week, so there's another reason why. I think my second favorite would be Rognak the Barbarian from the Fallout series. He's like a side character that you can find like the comic books of, and you get like the skills for like melee weapons and stuff. But you can like find his axe in Fallout 4 and Hubert's comics. So, just make sure your lock picking is high enough to enter. And then don't go onto the second floor. There's an ancient ghoul upstairs. So yeah, I don't know, man. That was
So is that like a
it's
reference to like Conan the Barbarian comics?
oh, big time, yeah.
Okay. Which I'll say now, I don't think Conan showed up on any of our lists because we're not all too familiar with Conan. So
I've never seen Conan.
yeah,
I saw like the OG movie like when I was like a kid, but
yeah.
there's definitely like several scenes that would be like questionable in today's world.
Yeah, I still plan on maybe we'll do it as a movie review sometime on this show, but yeah. So
Well, there was like a remake, I think like 10 years ago or something like that, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it was like
Oh,
2011.
really? Jeez,
Yeah.
that's a bad idea.
Jason Momoa, I think, right? As Conan.
Or
Yeah,
is
it was
that
like
in the works, or did that happen?
No,
It
it happened, but it was
Oh.
like I think it was like his first movie or something like that where he was like a star,
Ah,
like the main cast dude.
that makes me want to check it out now, like to see all. I think there's 3 movies in total, then, right?
Has got
Yeah.
25% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
It
that's
was like around like the
unfortunate.
time when like the first season of like Game of Thrones aired.
Like in a response to Game of Thrones type of thing, or like
No, just like that time
okay.
period. It was when- yeah.
Okay,
I think
cool.
I think he did it before he got the role in Game of Thrones. I think is
Oh, I see. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it got him Game of Thrones probably, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I picked some weird ones. Because again, while doing the research, I realized my interpretation was different, and I wasn't too familiar with the sort of glaring examples like Conan. You could also say like He-Man is a barbarian, but not Prince Adam, only when he's He-Man and becomes a strapping lad. I'm not even that familiar with He-Man, so yeah, there were some other examples I wanted to bring up, but
The
now I
class
forget
from Diablo 2.
it. Yeah, classic.
Yeah, definitely.
What are those people from Dragon Age? That race of like
Oh yeah, with the
they
bull
throw
horns.
goats at your castle.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
No, not the guys with bull horns. Those are the Canary. The
Yeah,
other
yeah.
guys, you go to like their castle and you have to like kill their leader.
Oh yeah. Like in the like in like their mountain DLC thing, right?
No, it's like in the marshes. You like travel through these marshes where like the dead
Yeah,
are coming out of the
But
water.
no, they actually they had
Oh,
like
okay.
DLC.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you kill the guy and he starts throwing a goat at your castle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to like put him on trial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anyways. The examples I brought, this one's weird. So ride with me. I chose Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon. Because that society is very much a barbarian society. They're even part of this council called the Barbaric or Barbarian Council. I don't know. A council of like a bunch of different settlements of these like Viking groups. Okay, so the setup of the world, if you haven't seen it, there's this ancient dragon that controls all these other dragons and forces those dragons to go get food and then feed it. And so they're all sort of in service to this dragon. And so for hundreds of years, there's been a conflict between humans and dragons because dragons come in and steal or kill people or take their livestock more commonly. So the humans are trying to defend themselves against dragons or else they'll die. So Hiccup is the chief of this village. I can't remember what the island's called. But so he's the son of this chieftain. His mother was killed by a dragon. So his father thinks. Spoilers for How to Train Your Dragon. But yeah, he's named Hiccup because there was a hiccup far back in the lineage of these chieftains. And he's also diminutive in comparison to this line of chiefs. So they call him Hiccup. But he's sort of an inversion to the rest of the society in that he is not interested in killing dragons. It's just never appealed to him. And he actually does shoot a dragon at one point. It downs it. It ends up in the woods. We all know this story. He makes the dragon the tail because the tail's broken. He also has one leg, blah, blah, blah. But he's sort of responsible with changing the society to one of being sort of in, what do you call that? Not cohabiting, but a mutual beneficial relationship. Not parasitism, but the good one. Symbiosis. Yes. Let's go.
Interdependence.
Yeah. With the dragons. So people learn how to ride dragons. They use dragons to fight if need be. But there's also other groups who want to, interrupt that or get dragons for their own nefarious purposes. He eventually becomes the chief of this society and leads the dragons back home to the hidden world. Spoilers again. Sorry. And yeah, so Hiccup's a cool barbarian in that way. Now, I really want to talk about Senua from Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. I guess you sort of Viking vibes, but tribes person vibes. I don't know what group that's supposed to be homage to or anything like that historically, but definitely exists sort of in the real world type of thing. More importantly, though, Senua suffers or has psychosis. And so, honestly, I just put this on the list because you could sort of like reach for her to be included in Barbarian, but I actually just want to talk about how cool an experience this game is because you're playing through as this person, and it's really sort of drawing awareness to what people who have this go through, and more so what sort of everyone who lives experiences, and how one person's reality, even though we might be seeing the same thing, our reality can differ based off our own experiences and our own chemical makeup or whatever. But she's playing through her journey, avenging her lover's death. Dillian, I think his name is. She was away from the village for some reason, trying to find a way out of the darkness, as she calls her psychosis. When she returns, her village has been slaughtered, including her lover, by the Northmen. That's all they're called. So this probably happened, the slaughter of the village, but then she goes on this journey to the Northman lands. And so it takes sort of the lens of Norse mythology and applies it to the story. So you're trying to fight Hela to bring your lover back from the dead type of thing and avenge your village. So the Northmen you encounter, you're not sure if they're real or not. This could all just be how she's processing her grief and fear and anger. All her emotions are sort of manifesting as these enemies you encounter and these beasts. So you're not sure if the game is meant to be like a fantasy game or if this is just what this person from this time frame dealing with this sort of condition would experience. And it's really sad in that way. There's a narrator to the game, and that serves as one of the voices you hear in your head, of which there are many. And it's when you first start the game, it tells you should play this with headphones on. And I am so lucky I was too lazy to grab my headphones because it is one of the creepiest things playing this game with the voices. Like, it's hard to concentrate. Yeah, like because one will be telling a story, one will be telling what you're doing and narrating, and then there's other voices that, because there's no like HUD in the game, they'll just be like, look out behind you, while another voice is talking, and then you're also having a flashback of like this other dude you like encountered who told you had to go on this journey. You're not even sure if that dude's real, like, and so it's always like, I don't know, the game is really an experience. And going through like Norse mythology through this lens of like psychosis, dealing with the god of, I want to say fire, and then Fjallraven. I don't know, Will, am I saying that right? The god of illusion, things. And obviously fighting the god of illusion, being someone dealing with psychosis, is a really tough encounter. But again, you're not sure if it's real. And I think the game does a really good job in not trivializing or sensationalizing someone in this condition. Obviously, it's a video game, so it's capitalizing off of that. They sold this video game, but they did their research. They worked with a bunch of specialists to try to get what that experience would feel like. And so I think that alone, it's worth playing. But obviously, if you're someone dealing with some mental health stuff, it might not be the best game for you to play. I had to take breaks from it often because it just got too much. And it's someone dealing with grief. So it is a really sad story. And definitely not the archetypal representation of a barbarian, but it fits the mold of being part of again, quotation marks, primitive or uncivilized society. Great gaming experience. And the last one, I'll just sort of try to power through this one, is Grog, who I've probably talked about on this podcast before, from Critical Role, which is a D&D show, of which the episodes are 4 hours long, and there's, I think, 250 of them now. And I've seen them all, so that is where I'm at in my life. What
Nerd.
Yeah. Grog is a barbarian. You see his journey from level 10 to 20. Really great character. Definitely fits into the mold of the big guy that Will hates at first. But obviously, when you have enough time, like 4 hour episodes and 150 of them, you start to see more into that character. And if you're the person who's playing Travis Willingham, definitely dives into the intricacies of being one of those players interacting with other people who are more intelligent. This is a character who can't read, is illiterate, and not very emotionally intelligent. But through his relationship to the other characters in the story, sort of gains that emotional intelligence. There's a devastating scene, spoilers, where one of the other player characters dies. And because this player character, Grog, this barbarian, is so unintelligent, he doesn't really understand how to process what's happening. So he just brings him to the cleric, like the person who died was like a gnome. So he just brings the body of this gnome to the cleric, just like, fix him, like, do the magic thing, like, fucking fix him. And he's like crying and stuff. It's like so fucking sad because he's like, I'm sorry, like, he failed his death saves. Like, I don't have spell slots. I can't do anything. We have to find another way. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's really sad. He goes on this journey where he's sort of outcasted by his tribe for saving the lives of this gnome, a different gnome. And so he gets outcasted after he gets beat the shit out of. And eventually he sort of regains the respect of that tribe and frees them from their enslavement by killing his uncle who killed his dad, I believe. It's really cool. Obviously, you probably don't have 600 hours or whatever that equals out to watch this show. So take my word for it. It's the best. But if you do have time, you should definitely check out Critical Role in Grog. Okay, holy. What's next, guys?
Well, just as a side note, because I just creeped Senua's sacrifice. So apparently she's like a Pict, which is Celtic from Scotland.
They're
like
called pikes. You idiot. I'm wrong, I think.
Yeah, so they're like in the north parts of that. I was reading, it's kind of cool because they combine like some of the characters.
Yeah, because she has the blue tattoos and stuff. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because like some of the characters that they talk about, like the supernatural ones, come from like different, I guess, groups.
Yeah.
Such as apparently like one of the characters is like from like Danish folklore, as well as like Norse and stuff like that.
I think that's Fjallraven, the god of illusion, because
it is. Yeah,
FJ should have. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned Hiccup, just because I would completely disagree with Hiccup being a barbarian. He's the opposite of Gimli.
Yeah, you're totally right.
He's from a barbarian culture, but he himself is like, if anything, he'd be like a ranger.
Or artificer or something. Like, yeah, no, you're totally right.
Like the speaking with animals, he's like so physically unimposing.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I think he's, like Gimli is a barbarian in spite of being highly civilized. Hiccup is highly civilized in spite of being a barbarian. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, I guess, how do we use it in fantasy? For D&D, I mean, it sounds like it's a very basic class in D&D, like one of like the pillars of the party.
See, I don't think it is. Let's tangent into D&D first, and then we'll go on to broader fantasy. So Luca, you've also had Barbarian in your campaign, and I think Dude Rock, Kevin, in my campaign was a totally different experience than Tonru or Ashish was in yours.
Absolutely.
What was your sort of experience of like running and writing for one?
I mean, with Tonru, it was pretty simple to guess what he'd do in any situation. Like, it's like if I put an NPC in front of him, he'll try to kill it most likely. Like 9 times out of 10, he'll try to kill it with his axe. So honestly, it's pretty easy writing for a barbarian. Like if I want to bait him into something, it's just like I can put out anything and he'll bite. Like
some of the favorite videos I've ever taken is you and Ashish's conversation. Like you being like his patron god thing. And what was the one where it's like, you took the human's armor, blah blah blah. Well, I didn't think too much of it, to be honest. It's so good.
Like playing in a campaign with Dude Rock with like an intelligent barbarian was the best. Like he was so reliable. Tonru was more of a liability for the party.
Yeah, definitely like a fun player. Obviously, she's a good friend and a fun character to play with.
But from like group really from the party's perspective though, like in the world, he would be just a mess to travel with. Like
also he was an orc, right? So I guess that's a lot different than playing as a dwarf barbarian. As an orc barbarian where already society's against you because you're other, and then you're a barbarian. So tough there as well. But yeah, I don't know, writing for Dude Rock for me was tougher because not only are they're both barbarians, but they're different races. But not only that, Dude Rock was a path of the totem, which is like they're almost like druidic in that they get these natural abilities. So he can see with the sight of an eagle. He's got the strength of whatever, and there's something that he can speak with animals and stuff. Whereas Tonru was like berserker, so it was just like I can hit things really hard and sometimes even harder than that. It's like a totally different thing. So like when I was writing for Dude Rock, it was more like, how do I get this guy to see nature different to help the party in some way, or how can I bring in his tribes and the tribes they interact with to sort of pull into that. Will. You ran D&D. Did you ever encounter a barbarian?
Oh, I don't think anyone used it, but I mean, I guess when I said like pillar of fantasy party, I'm thinking like, like the warrior mage thief kind of thing.
Yeah, like barbarian definitely fits in as a tank for sure.
Yeah,
more so than anything else.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's my preferred class in Diablo. That's what I've always used for both Diablo 2 and 3. Just because it's the most fun to play by yourself, because you just tank the fuck out of everyone. And like you don't have to worry about like other people when you're playing and stuff like that. So
do you play as a barbarian in Skyrim? Now there's no class system in Skyrim, but that's not your character makeup?
No, never. But like I know what you mean. There was like a period when I was like super deep into Elder Scrolls where I would like create characters and like RP them, and
that's awesome.
It was a very dark timeline, but
sorry, let me tangent 1 second. So Will and I have been friends for a couple years, but the first time we ever like hung out, like I came over to your house with a friend of ours, and you were playing Skyrim.
Oh yeah. This is when I first moved to Calgary.
Yeah. So like I don't know, everyone sort of plays that game a little bit different, but there's all like there's things that connect everyone's playing experience. But watching Will play was the funniest thing because it was like never the way I would play the game, like with thought and processing, and like I think you cast water breathing at one point. I was like, yo, what a nerd.
I cast water breathing.
You like pause the game to cast water breathing. I was like, man, that's so funny. This guy should play D&D, and then eventually did. Luca, would you ever play a game through as a barbarian?
Probably not. I love magic too much. Any game that has magic, I can't resist.
What about though, like a Path of the Totem barbarian, where you have like that druidic sort of feel?
Yeah, of any of the barbarians, like I would, definitely be a Path of the Totem. I don't know the D&D like barbarian subclasses very well. I just know that like yeah, the Path of the Totem was definitely cool. Like being able to see like the eyes of the eagle and all the resistances. Like Dudrock was immune to everything except for what, like poison or something. Like
No, he was immune to poison. I think psychic damage is the only
yeah,
one.
it's like the
Yeah.
only thing that he's not resisting. So yeah, barbarians are super cool. Plus like the bow, like the boost to HP, like taking half damage
Yeah,
on
half
everything.
damage.
Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
But again,
that's like the biggest tank ability in the game for sure.
like my personality is always towards wizard and mage classes.
I think I would do it like I think I would probably choose it as a if I was going to make like a D&D character. That'd be like one of my top 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I've never felt inclined to play a barbarian because I just think the fighter, which we'll get to eventually, is just a better, not better, but fits more of what I like to do with characters. Because I feel like as a barbarian, and this is, I think, a downfall of it in D&D, is that it's sort of built into that what we've been talking about, like less civilized. It doesn't need to be, but that's certainly the subtext you get when creating one.
Yeah.
Especially like, most people who make barbarians put intelligence as their dump stat kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but like outside of like D&D, because I've never made it like a barbarian class for D&D, but like, yeah, I think the one where I chiefly used it was always Diablo. But again, that's because if you're going to play by yourself, that was kind of the way to go. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, it can be really fun. Like I've started Skyrim playthroughs where like I'm like, okay, this time I'm using only 2-handed weapons. Like, it's like, I don't know, like 5-6 hours into it, it's like, okay, sneaky archer, or like give me some spells.
Yeah, I never went sneaky archer. Like I didn't even know that was like a thing until like several years after.
I did it, but honestly, I after a while, it's not that fun.
Yeah, it's fun for a bit, but I love the kill cams in Skyrim where like it follows the arrow. Like I love getting those. And the best way to get them is to like sneaky.
The best is when you miss, but
somehow, but it still does it.
Yeah. What was that? Okay, so let's move on to out of D&D, but just general fantasy. How do you think they're best used? What do you think are some of the flaws? We've talked about a few of them, but maybe go into depth. Start with you, Will.
I think like the flaw would be like, I guess like what we talked about earlier, where it's just like it could be used as a way to like describe a group of people that one group finds to be like uncivilized. For example, especially with like fire and ice, with like Game of Thrones and stuff like that, because we see the Ironborn more so in the show, but like in the books they are like they're still like Viking raider dudes, but we get to see like more of like, I guess, their like society and organization and stuff like that of their culture, which I think like I love the Ironborn in the books. In fact, one of my favorite characters is Victorian Greyjoy or whatever his name is. He's like one of my favorite characters like in literature.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love him. But like he's like a perfect barbarian because he's like stupid, but also like is aware that he's kind of stupid. But he's also like super
self-aware barbarian. Is my new Tinder bio.
Yeah, but I mean they can always fall into like that super basic stereotype.
The big guy.
The big guy with an axe.
What about the people that they encounter in what's that area called? The Pale? No, that's from something else. The
like north of the wall.
No, well, yeah. So the wildlings could fit under that umbrella, but the ones that Bran and Tyrion hire.
Oh yeah, the mountain tribes.
Yeah,
the Vale. Yeah,
the Vale.
Yeah,
yeah. That would fit as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. It's funny that you mentioned the Ironborn as like, or Victorian as your favorite, because like Euron Greyjoy is like,
oh, he's the most evil character of all time.
Yeah, he's like all of those barbarian characteristics plus like a high level of intelligence.
Oh, he's like menacing. Like I absolutely hate what they did to him in the show.
Oh yeah, horrible, just embarrassing.
completely different. Like, if you have no idea who we're talking about, I'd suggest you watch like a YouTube video on it.
Yeah, like Euron Greyjoy is one of the most terrifying characters in all of A Song of Ice
because
and
the
Fire.
vibe from the show is just like deranged pirate.
He's just a stupid pirate. Like
Yeah.
in the book, he's
British
like
punk rock star.
yeah, just
Yeah, Sid
so
Vicious.
bad.
Yeah.
What about you, Luca?
Like how it's used in fantasy and stuff. Well, I mean, like again, like Barbarians, it's just like such a classic. Like I don't like the Conan style barbarian, like that 80s style barbarian. Like I like dynamic characters, I like characters with depth and multiple, with actual thoughts and motivations and things like this. But again, like for all things in fantasy, like and writing in general, it's like how you use them as characters. Like if you flesh out a barbarian character, like or even like a big guy that like Will wouldn't like if you flesh out that character, like it can really be like a enjoyable character to read or like watch in a show. But yeah, I think the Ironborn are a great example.
Yeah, I think my favorite, like, because Victorian is like one of like the POV characters in the 5th book, I believe, and the part of the 4th. But like,
And what's the relation? Because I've only seen the show. So
Victorian is Euron's brother, right? He's one of the 3 brothers.
Does he show up in the show?
No.
Okay.
He's a Theon's uncle, but like he has like, oh, he's just like super cool and like macho dude. I think there's like one scene, like one chapter where he's like fighting like a bunch of he's like engaging like in like naval combat, and he like jumps because like his thing is he always wears armor like when he's sailing, which is like you wouldn't do because he'd sink to the he'd sink if you fall in the water. But like his reasoning is because he's more manly than everyone else. So he's like, he basically onto like this ship from like somewhere else. I think it's like the Red Wine Fleet or something like that from the Reach. And he's just like, basically like looks around. He's like, yeah, like these guys are like pathetic because I'm like an absolute unit. And then he just annihilates everyone. But he's like a super cool character because again, he definitely is like kind of dumb as a brick, but like he also like thinks a lot, and like you get to see a lot into his thoughts and stuff compared to like other characters I found.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like even if you have like a pretty like unintelligent character, but if you're like flesh them out, it's like really enjoyable to read and listen to.
Yeah, because I think intelligence could point to like a very different number of things, like emotional intelligence, like just like useful knowledge, even in some applications. Like if you're going into the mountains to find the thing, the barbarian's better to have with you than the engineer, because they know how the lay of the land sort of works. So it's all sort of relative to the circumstance. I like this character. I like the big guy trope, but I understand when it's used poorly. It's like any other trope. It's annoying and you can see through it, kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I like this character in fantasy. I also love that 80s style of art of just the strapping dudes, sort of like homoerotica. Fucking that's awesome, man. So
me and the boys
doing a barbarian photo shoot. This thumbnail, I'm gonna Photoshop our faces on the strapping barbarian lads.
Yeah,
just full body pictures of Will with all our heads on them.
Yeah, I don't know, Victoria. Man, I want to talk about it so much. I think I'm gonna get back into reading the books. At least the 5th book. The 5th book was a masterpiece. Same with the 4th.
Of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do that after we do this breakdown of classes, because I feel like it's culminating. It'll only go so long before we're not able to not talk about it.
Yeah.
Come to blows. But I think that'll do it for our conversation on Barbarians. So just to wrap up here again, the first episode of Unabashed came out on Friday. We're talking about Naruto with Dustin Harris. Check that out. Look out for the next episode of Ruminations on the Fires of Vengeance. And another episode of Unabashed coming out next Friday. Not this coming Friday, but the one after that. I think the schedule's somewhere in here. So as always, I am Matt.
I'm Luca.
And I'm Will.
And we are the Lords of Lore. Thanks for hanging out.